Today the Labour Party are coming under pressure to get rid of the two-child benefit cap. This was a cap introduced by the Cameron government during austerity, which limits benefit payments to the first two children that people have. Now, the effect of the policy is to save the government £1.7 billion a year, which is the same amount as it would cost to scrap it. And scrapping it would pull immediately 300,000 children out of poverty and 700,000 children out of extreme poverty. In other words, it's the kind of thing you'd expect the Labour government to do, especially given that one of the biggest achievements of the last Labour government was bringing down child poverty. Here's a clip from Politics Live today showing the pressure that Labour are under from the left to scrap this policy.
Or else actually the most important thing that we all around this table should care most about, which is trust in politics, that is the most important thing that this Labour government has to change.
Well, so how are you going to respond to this? It's only days into the new government. It's in the eye. Starmer facing immediate challenge from the left. So if we're talking about challenges on all sides of the political spectrum, left and right, from the left on two-child benefit cap. Now, this was going on during the campaign, and it unites, actually, Nigel Farage, Suella Braverman, and many in the Labour Party. And we are hearing that, well, she's tweeted it, I think, Labour's Liverpool Riverside MP, Kim Johnson, I've long campaigned against the two-child benefit cap, and I'm going to lay an amendment to the King's Speech, which sets out your legislation, calling for the cap to be scrapped immediately. Do you agree with her?
OK, so firstly, the politics of this. This is an amendment to the King's Speech. And just so we're really clear, the King's Speech is a speech given by the Sovereign in the House of Lords that is written by the Prime Minister that lays out the government's legislative agenda for the current Parliament, and a Parliament usually lasts a year. And now this is something we're going to see a lot in this Parliament, MPs putting down amendments to put the government in a really tricky position. Because what is Starmer supposed to do in this situation? Is he really going to, days into a Labour government, whip his own MPs to support a cap on benefits, the two-child benefit cap, that means that children are thrown into poverty, even though the cost of getting rid of the policy is so small and could easily be paid for with a number of tax increases, most notably a wealth tax increase? Well, it waits to be seen, but this is very tricky politics for Starmer. Let's continue with the clip.
Well, it's first just worth saying about this issue that child poverty is at the core of what the Labour Party...
And this would lift 250,000 children out of poverty.
It would indeed.
Of what the Labour Party exists to do. Right. However, what it meant to change our party from where we were in 2019 is to be a responsible party that cares about the state of the nation's finances and does not commit to things that it doesn't know whether it can afford. And Rachel Reeves has been really clear, Keir Starmer has been really clear about this policy. We do not yet know if we can afford to support the removal of the two-child.
Would you like to remove it?
So the responsible thing to do is say to the public, it breaks our hearts that we can't, but we can't. The public finances are in a dire state, and so we can't commit to doing this now. And that is the kind of levelling with the public.
I think it breaks our heart to see that we've got record levels of actual destitution in the country, and you've seen that as well from, from the reports that have come out from the Rowntree Foundation.
OK, so there are two reasons why the Labour Party are doing this. Firstly, they've got political reasons to do this, and secondly, economic reasons. Let's deal with the politics of it first. So at face value, this looks like really bad politics, doesn't it? As I've just said, the Labour Party are going to have a debate on an amendment to the King's Speech that's going to put Starmer in the position of whipping his own MPs just days into a Labour government to support a cap on benefits for the poorest children in the country that pushes 300,000 of them into poverty. That's not a good look for a Labour government. There are two reasons why he might think it's a good idea, however. The first reason, which is a regular theme of these videos, is to put distance between the Labour Party of Keir Starmer and that of Jeremy Corbyn. And the second reason is to do with trust. He's been really clear going into the election that he was only going to commit to things that he could afford. And what he wants to say is that there are difficult choices to be made in politics, that he's made those difficult choices, and that he's not going to go back on them in government. Now, this really gets to me. As I said in the previous video, politicians often talk about hard choices. But we just had from Starmer yesterday that he was going to commit to increasing defence spending. A hard choice? Well, it seems to me that the hard choices are always the choices that fall on the least fortunate in society, and that is a shame. Now let's hear the economic argument from Starmer about this policy.
So when people say, look, you should be making all these spending commitments and...
Well, my first reaction, we keep saying collectively as a party, we've got to take tough decisions. And in the abstract, everyone says, that's right, Keir. And then we get a tough decision. We've been in one of those for the last few days, say, well, I don't like that. Can we just not make that one? I'm sure there's another tough decision somewhere else that we could make. But we have to take the tough decisions. And this isn't some sort of reflection on some focus group that says, we'd like Labour to have an economic straitjacket on. It's the fundamentals. Liz Truss was very different to others. She proved the thesis that if you make unfunded commitments, then the economy is damaged and working people pay the price.
Right, and that could be tax or spending, right?
That could be tax. For her, it was unfunded tax cuts, but it could be unfunded spending. So if you want proof that unfunded commitments cause economic damage, which is then visited on working people, you've got a living example of that. And that can come from both sides of politics. And so it's a fundamental. I will not let the next Labour government get anywhere near the equivalent of what Liz Truss did.
Okay, so let's deal with this economic argument. It is true to say that Liz Truss's mini-budget caused a great deal of damage to the economy. It threw financial markets into turmoil, and that led to increased mortgage rates, which had an effect on many working families in the country. But there's a bit of a sleight of hand going on here, because there is a difference between tax cuts and government spending. Let me explain the difference. So the thesis that Truss put forward was that essentially you can borrow to create tax cuts, and that those tax cuts will stimulate the economy and therefore maybe not quite pay for themselves, but it's going to increase economic growth, and that's going to have a positive effect in the future. So the tax cuts are going to partly, or maybe entirely, pay for themselves if you believe the argument. But that is sort of premised upon the idea that if you cut something like corporation tax, that tax cut is going to lead to business investment that's going to compensate for the tax cut. That's quite a stretch. How do you know that the tax cut is going to result in a change of behaviour that's going to increase economic growth and tax revenue? Well, you don't really. It's a sort of hypothetical. The difference between a tax cut and spending is obvious then, because we do know that when the government spends money, it goes directly into the economy, and that creates a multiplier effect and possibly also attracts inward investment from business depending on how you spend it. So there is a difference between tax cuts and spending, and let's be clear about this policy. Investing in children in poverty is clearly a good long-term investment for the future of our society. What happens to these children if we don't lift them out of poverty? What happens to their future? What effect does that have on society? What effect does that have on the economy? So there are economic reasons to do this. You could see this as a long-term investment in the future of our country. And that's leaving aside the moral reasons to do, which I haven't talked about in this video so far. It's clearly morally right, if you have a choice as a government, to prioritise lifting children out of poverty. Well, that's got to come close to the top of any list, particularly if you're talking about a Labour government.
Of course, and I agree with you. This is a really important policy question rather than, the sort of personality psychodrama stuff. And what you've seen with the Labour government is we will have serious policy discussions, but we will also level with the public where we have to. We're not going to pretend that we can do everything and do everything fast when actually the nation's finances, our justice system, the water, everything we've seen so far is in a shocking state of disrepair. And that is the inheritance that we have been left by Conservatives who stopped governing. I've said I, in principle, would love to be able to change that policy in order to support those families. And I don't agree with Claire that in government, actually, you have to care about principle and that's what you decide. No, you care about principle and you also care about pragmatism and the reality. And you need to care about both of those things if you are going to govern responsibly.
So I thought I'd give Labour the final word there. You heard it. This is responsible government. Well, I'll have to disagree with that. Leaving children in poverty is not responsible. It's not pragmatic. It's wrong. And I'm glad there are left-wing Labour MPs challenging the Labour Party to be better than this in government. The money is there. They can spend it. They should spend it. There are good economic reasons to do it. And more importantly, there are good moral reasons to do it. Well, let me know what you think in the comments. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to the channel. For now, goodbye, best wishes.